Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. This is Judah. I'm here to sound the trumpet yet again. The second Exodus, what should be expected? In case y'all are not aware of all the chaos all over the world, floods, tsunamis, hurricanes, hailstorms, wars, earthquakes, and much more. All of these are judgments on the nation, and they're all connected to the time and day that we're in. What I'm hoping to show you today is just how close we are to the second Exodus. And I'm going to use history from the first Exodus, comparing it to what we would expect from the second Exodus based on the plagues. The second Exodus, what should be expected? The Bible says there will be a second Exodus that will pale the first Exodus from Egypt into insignificance. Some 2 million Israelites left Egypt by mighty miracles from the Creator. The second Exodus will be greater in number by far in comparison to the first exit from Egypt. Before we start, let's look at the word plague. What does it mean to be plagued by something? And the definition is as follows. Plague somebody or something with something to cause pain or trouble to somebody or to something over a period of time. To be plagued by doubt, events, and just plain chaos. So this word is not only referring to disease, which we have witnessed that too, but troubles also. Is history repeating itself? A careful study shows that the modern descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel include many in the northwestern European countries. The descendants of Joseph include many of the English-speaking countries today, most notably the United States, Britain, and some of Britain's former colonies like Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. Just as Egypt was blessed by the Creator because of Joseph, many nations have been blessed through Joseph's modern descendants who have been the recipients of the Creator's birthrights or the blessings of Abraham. But just as Egypt did, the Bible says some of these nations will turn against the modern descendants of Israel and make slaves of them. This happened during Israel's enslavement in Egypt. Now, examining the timeline of when the 10 plagues of Egypt started and the time between each plague in the first Exodus, which we will use to compare the plagues of this coming second Exodus. My objective here is not to pinpoint an exact date, but to make you aware of what you should look at in this coming second Exodus so that you can be alerted as of how close we are. Not pinpoint, but close, at least in proximity. The Bible doesn't give us an exact answer to these questions. And as a result, there are a number of guesses. These range anywhere from about a month to about a year. The Jewish Mishnah says 1 year, but based on my studies, I'm guessing about 4 to 5 months. And here's why I say that. We do know several facts for sure. First, the Bible says in Exodus chapter 7 and verse 7 that Moses was 80 years old when the 10 plagues started, after he spoke to Pharaoh. After the plagues were done and Pharaoh finally let the Israelites go, They wandered in the desert for 40 years. Numbers 14, verses 33 to 34. Numbers 32, verse 13. Moses died at the end of the 40 years at the age of 120. Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 7. So if Moses was 80 at the start and wandered 40 years and died at 120, the plagues had to have ended in under a year. Now I think I can narrow this down even more by looking at a few other facts. We know the duration of 3 of the plagues. The first plague lasted for 7 days. Exodus chapter 7, verse 25. The 9th plague lasted for 3 days. Exodus chapter 10, verse 21 to 23. And the 10th plague was for 1 night, beginning at midnight. Exodus 12, chapter 12, verse 29 to 31. While we don't know the length of the other 7 plagues, it's my guess that none of them were much longer than these. I don't think they could have withstood them, except for a very short period of time. For example, I read somewhere that it would only take a few days for a swarm of millions of locusts, which was the 8th plague, to destroy every bit of green vegetation in sight. This being said, if we make the average length of each plague, say for example 4 days, we would have a total of 40 days that the plagues lasted. This is also a biblical number that corresponds with the length of other punishments. Examples: 40 years of wandering in the desert, Numbers 14, verse 33 to 34, and Numbers 32, verse 13. 40 days of rain for Noah's flood, Genesis 7, chapter 7, verse 4 and verse 12. Goliath tormented Israel for 40 days before the Creator helped David to kill him. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 16. The Creator gave Nineveh 40 days to repent or be destroyed. Jonah chapter 3, verse 4. Now the biggest problem we have is not knowing the length of time between the different plagues. My feeling is that it was not a lot of time. A few other facts can help in making this determination. I believe that the time frame between the 7th plague, which was hail, and the 10th plague, which was death of the firstborn, was no more than a few months. I say this because Exodus chapter 9, verse 31 says that when the hail came, all of the flax and barley were ruined. The barley was in the ear and the flax was in the bud. Exodus chapter 9, verse 32. But the wheat and the spelt were not ruined. They ripened late. So we know that flax and barley are in bloom in late March, with wheat and spelt being in bloom a month or 2 later. Also, when the 8th plague was sent, swarms of locusts, the Creator said they would destroy every plant of the land that the hail left. Exodus chapter 10 and verse 12. This means that it shortly followed the hail. Still before the wheat and spelt were in bloom, probably in late or early March, and y'all realize something. This is during the very close time of the first month of the year, the month of Aviv. That's when all this was going on. So we also know that the last plague fell either in late March or early April, which is the beginning of the first month of the year for the Hebrews, because that is the time of the Passover. When the Creator passed over the houses of the Israelites and didn't kill their firstborn because they had the blood of the Passover lamb covering the doorframes of their houses. Exodus chapter 12, verses 21 to 27. So the time frame for the 7th plague through the 10th plague was almost certainly no more than a month and a half to 2 months. This works out to be about 2 weeks at most for each. The length of the plague plus the warning preceding it. If we carry this out to the other 6 plagues, we get 12 weeks. So the total is 20 weeks, or about 4 to 5 months for all 10 plagues. So what would be different about this second Exodus? What is the second Exodus, and when does it occur? Like I said before, I can't pinpoint dates, and that's not my objective. What I'm trying to do is to help you see how close we are. Nobody can pinpoint any date, but I can make you aware of just how close we are to the second Exodus. And that's probably going to have a lot to do with this coming eclipse in 2024. The children of Israel left Egypt on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread and crossed through the Red Sea on the last or 7th day of this feast. Now, this part is where a lot of bad teachers cause misunderstanding and misleading of the people. Because when they see the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which would have been the 15th of the month, that was the day or night that Israel left Egypt. But some teachers are teaching because of this statement right here, the first day. They are causing confusion among the people by claiming this was the first day of the month. But the 15th day cannot be the first day of the month. So let's just keep going. This was the first Exodus, but there's more. The biblical prophets speak of a greater or second Exodus to occur in the last days, where the Creator's people who've been scattered throughout the nations of the world will be set free from their spiritual, economic, and political enslavement in the nations, which are under the control of Babylon the Great. There is much to learn on this subject, and it's an important subject to study, since it affects our spiritual destiny. The following is a comprehensive analysis of this topic, which explores all the biblical scriptures on the subject of the second Exodus. It's a long one, but try to stay with me and listen to the end. It will help you understand end times Bible prophecy in a way that only a privileged and enlightened few will do. You have never read anything like this before. It will help you to understand where you personally fit into the end times Bible prophecy. So a look at the end times Bible prophecies relating to the second Exodus, the issue in people's hearts. The Bible clearly teaches that the 10 tribes of the ancient northern kingdom of Israel, known biblically by various names such as the house of Israel, Samaria, or Ephraim, were exiled among the nations of the world because of sin. At the same time, the biblical prophets and Jewish sages over the past 2,000 years have predicted that in the end times, at the coming of the Messiah, which is David, through a series of supernatural events, these tribes will be gathered or regathered and return to the land of Israel to be reunited with their brothers who are descended from the southern kingdom of Judah. Furthermore, there is clear biblical and historical evidence that the 10 northern tribes of Israel, collectively known as Ephraim, are largely to be found among the people scattered across the earth. The people are awakening to the need to return to the Hebrew roots of the Torah, not New Testament. You have to return to the Hebrew roots of the Torah, centered lifestyle and spiritual walk. It then follows that some are coming to the fundamental truth taught numerous places in the testimony of the prophets. The Torah believers are actually redeemed Israelites and are the literal biological descendants of Abraham. As such, many are beginning to see that the numerous promises that the Creator made to Abraham and his descendants apply to them, especially the promises that the land of Israel is an important aspect of their promised future inheritance. With these revelations often comes a newfound zeal and enthusiasm about returning to the land of Israel. For many, it is a question of not if, but when do we return? This is the question I'm going to deal with in the following study in attempting to determine the timing of the return of Ephraim to the land of Israel, often referred to as the second or greater Exodus. This is a difficult and complex subject, and many factors need to be considered. No one has all the answers, and neither do I. But hopefully, this presentation you're about to hear will provoke thought and discourse that will move us all toward a greater understanding of this subject. In this work, I will cover much ground in panoramic manner without delving into the fine details of any one biblical passage. If my overall analysis is correct, then it is my hope that other biblical researchers will look at the evidence presented here and synergistically we can fine tune the details and elucidate this subject. Since there is no direct place in the scriptures that tells us the exact year or date when Ephraim will be regathered and returned to the land of Israel, although many believe, including myself, that the process will begin, listen closely, y'all, on a Jubilee year. We must examine many prophecies and prophetic scenarios in order to extrapolate from them the answer to our question. Before we take the plunge, let's review some fundamental biblical truths. Ephraim's return to the land of Israel is a fundamental truth of the Torah, as the very words of the Holy Creator dictated to and written down by Moses. The Torah, the biblical books of Genesis through Deuteronomy, and also other books that were removed from the Torah, is the bedrock of biblical truth upon which the rest of biblical revelation is founded. This is the place to begin when discussing the timing of Ephraim's return. In Jewish thought, Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 1 to 10 is the embryo from which all the other scriptures discussing Ephraim's return are birthed. Here the Creator promises to gather Israel from all the nations where he has scattered them because of spiritual apostasy, and he promises to return them to the land of Israel. This prophecy has not yet been fulfilled, and nor is it referring to the Jewish captives who returned from their 70 years exile in Babylonia. Since the term all nations is used in this prophecy, the ancient empire of Babylon is not all nations. You got to understand that. Here is the prophecy in its entirety. And it shall come to pass, when all these things are come upon you, the blessings and the curse which I have set before you, and you shall call them to mind among all the nations, whether your Creator has driven you, and shall return unto your Creator, and shall obey his voice according to all that I command you this day, you and your children, with all your heart and with all your soul, that then your Creator will bring you back from captivity and have compassion upon you, and will return and gather you from all the nations wherever your Creator has scattered you. If any of you be driven out unto the outmost parts of heaven, from thence will your Creator gather you, and from thence will he fetch you, and your Creator will bring you into the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it, and he will do you good and multiply you above your fathers. And your Creator will circumcise your heart and the heart of your seed to love your Creator with all your heart and with all your soul, that you may live. And your Creator will put all these curses upon your enemies and upon them that hate you, which persecuted you. And you shall return and obey the voice of Yah, and do all his commandments which I command you this day. And Yah, your Creator, will make you plenteous in every work of your hand, and the fruit of your body, and in the fruit of your cattle, and in the fruit of your land for good. For Yah will again rejoice over you for good, and he, as he rejoiced over your fathers. If you shall hearken unto the voice of Yah your Creator, to keep his commandments and his statutes, which are written in this book of the law, and if you turn unto Yah your Creator with all your heart and with all your soul. The Jewish sages affirm that Ephraim will return. The biblical prophets predicted that all the tribes of Israel, including the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom, or Ephraim, would be scattered to other lands outside of Israel, and that Yah would gather them, regather them in the last days, and return them to the land of Israel. This has also been the dominant belief of the Jewish sages as recorded in their writings and in their oral traditions, including the Talmud. For example, the scriptures tells us about the scattering of the 12 tribes. And Yah rooted them out of their land in anger and in wrath and in great indignation, and cast them into another land, as it is this day. Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 28. The Babylonian Talmud, they had declared them, for example, the 10 tribes of Israel, to be perfect heathens or Gentiles. As it is said in scriptures, they have dealt treacherously against Yah, for they have begotten strange children. An Orthodox Jewish commentary on Genesis states regarding Genesis chapter 48, verse 19, quoting Orthodox Jewish sage of the Middle Ages, and as far as Ezra, many nations will descend from him, Ephraim. That is, the word for fullness connotes abundance. The phrase meaning, and his seed will become the abundance of the nations. According to Radak's R. David Kimichi, a Torah scholar in the Middle Ages, commentary on the same verse. This refers to the exile when the lands of others will be filled with his scattered descendants. You can see also in Hosea chapter 7, verse 8. Ephraim shall be mingled among the nations. Pertaining to the end-time regathering of the 12 tribes, the late well-known Orthodox Jewish leader Menachem Skirneson stated that the future king, Messiah, David, will not only redeem the Jews from exile, but will restore the observance of the Torah commandments to its complete state. What does that mean? Let me read that one more time, because I want to make sure you identify what this is saying. David will not only redeem the Jews from exile, but will restore the observance of the Torah commandment to its complete state. That means he's going to reinstate those books that were removed, which a lot of teachers claim they're forgeries or pseudepigrapha. But right here it's telling you it's going to be restored to its complete state. So if it was already complete, being the first 5 books, then what is the meaning of this? Obviously, the first 5 books is not the complete set of books. The commandments to its complete state, meaning all of the books, which will only be possible when the Israelites are living in the land of Israel. At this same time, Skinnerson, who is quoting the notable rabbinic sage of the Middle Ages, Moses Maimonides, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, also known as the Rambam, says there will be an ingathering of the dispersed remnant of Israel. This will make it possible for the Davidic dynasty to be reinstated and for the observance of the Torah and its mitzvah to be restored in its, here it is again, in its totality. All the books are going to be put back according to Jacob. And by the way, this is happening right now, but most of our people are not acknowledging this. Those books, they are being exposed, they're being revealed in this very day. This is the perfect timing for that, because we're so close to the end that you need to know this. A lot of the information you're missing in from the removing of these other books. This is why it's being restored in its totality. According to Jacob Emanuel Scotchett, the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel will also return as substantiation for his claim. He cites Talmud Sanhedrin to serve Yah. He also cites Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 32 to 37, Ezekiel chapter 40 and verse 42. Furthermore, the Art Scroll Bereshit, volume 1, states in its commentary on Genesis chapter 48 and verse 19 regarding Ephraim, Aramuk explains, while it's true that the dispersion of the descendants of Ephraim and Manasseh was caused by the unfaithfulness and sinfulness of Ephraim's descendants, Hosea chapter 7 and verse 8, Jacob's blessings was not in vain, for they will return to the Creator and will have their share in the world to come. Even the darkness in which the 10 tribes were lost will one day become as radiant as the day. And in the perspective of history, did not these exiled children of the patriarchs enlighten the nations among whom they were scattered? They did so by teaching their conquerors the fundamental ideas of the knowledge and love of the Holy Creator, ideals they had never forsaken. Hence, they too have a Masonic vocation, and their Messiah David, the Targum Yonasan, on Exodus chapter 40 and verse 11, will play an essential role in humanity's redemption, for he will be the precursor of the Mashiach David. It is therefore not surprising to find that the prophet Jeremiah chapter 3 verse 12 speaks affectionately on Ephraim in this light. Jacob's words, his offspring will fill the nations, assume the significance of blessing. In regard to Deuteronomy chapter 32 verse 26, which says, I said I would scatter them into the 4 corners. This refers to the exile of the 10 tribes who were scattered to an unknown place where they have never been heard from again. On the phrase of the same verse, I would make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. This would explain how us, the real Jews, are hidden in plain sight, while the impostors or fake Jews are in battle with the other nations. The same Chumash states, this is a reference to the exiles of Judah and Benjamin, the Davidic kingdom from which today's known Jews are descended. It goes on to say that though the nations would seek to destroy Israel entirely, Yah would never allow Israel to become extinct or disappear. And if you pay attention to what's going on today, this has never been more true. We're not in that land that's fighting among Hezbollah, uh, Hamas, and all those others. We're not there. So who could this be talking about? Because Yah would never allow Israel to become extinct or disappear. He's not talking about them, he's talking about us. Israel's perpetual existence is a constant reminder of Yah's plan, and eventually the true Israelites will thrive and fulfill Yah's intention for it. The 19th century Orthodox Jewish sage S.R. Hurst, in his commentary on the Pentateuch, on the same verse translates the phrase, I would scatter them into the corners as I would relegate them into a corner, and then says that the Hebrew here refers to the extreme end of a surface, the side or corner. He too relates this fate to the 10 tribes who would be scattered to some distant corner of the world where left entirely to themselves, they could mature towards serious reflection and ultimate return to me. What's more, Abraham Cain, in his classic book, Every Man's Talmud, the major teaching of the rabbinic sages, states, with regard to the Messianic era, millennial period, another confirmed belief was that the Messiah would affect the reunion of the tribes of Israel. While we find the teaching the 10 tribes will have no share in the world to come, the Talmud usually takes the opposite view by appealing to such texts as Isaiah chapter 27 verse 13 and Jeremiah chapter 3 verse 12. The Jewish sages enunciated the doctrine of the return of the lost 10 tribes. Great will be the day when the exiles of Israel will be reassembled as the day when heaven and earth were created. A law of nature will even be miraculously suspended to assist this great reunion. In the present world, when the wind blows in the north, it does not blow in the south, and vice versa. But in the hereafter, with reference to the gathering together of the exiles of Israel, the Holy One, blessed be he, said, I will bring a northwest wind into the world, which will affect both directions. As it is written, I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, keep not back. Bring my sons from afar, and my daughters from the end of the earth. Isaiah chapter 43 and verse 6, Esther chapter 1 and verse 8. The regathering of the tribes will be preceded by another wondrous event, the restoration of the holy city. If a man tells you that the scattered exiles of Israel have been gathered together without Jerusalem having been rebuilt, don't believe him. For thus it is written, Yah does build up Jerusalem, Psalms 147 and verse 2, and then he gathers together the outcast of Israel. The Babylonian Talmud. What was their reason for mentioning the gathering of the exiles after the blessing of the years? Because it is written, but you, O mountains of Israel, you shall shoot forth your branches and yield your fruit to your people Israel, for they are at hand to come. Ezekiel chapter 34 verse 8. And when the exiles are assembled, judgment will be visited on the wicked. This is happening today. As it says, and I will turn my hand upon you and purge away your dross as with lye. And it is written further, and I will restore your judges as at the first. And when judgment is visited on the wicked, transgressors cease, and presumptuous sinners are included with them. As it is written, but the destruction of the transgressors and the sinners shall be together, and they that forsake Yah shall be consumed. And when the transgressions have disappeared, the horn of the righteous is exalted, as it is written, all the horns of the wicked also will I cut off, but the horns of the righteous shall be lifted up, and the proselytes of righteousness are included with the righteous. As it says, you shall rise up before the hoary head and honor the face of the old man. And if a stranger sojourn with you, and where is the horn of the righteous? Exalted. And where is the horn of righteous? Exalted. In Jerusalem, as it says, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper that love you. And when Jerusalem is built, David will come, just as it says. The first clue as to the timing of Ephraim's return to the land of Israel. Now that we know that the Torah and the Jewish sages says that Ephraim will return in the end times, let's now begin examining the pieces of the puzzle in the scriptures pertaining to the timing of Ephraim's return. As we do so, these pieces will begin to come together in your understanding, and a picture will emerge, allowing us to pinpoint a time frame of Ephraim's return to the land of Israel. Now, I shouldn't have said pinpoint here, but we're going to get a close proximity. So excuse this word. We're going to get a close proximity of Ephraim's return to the land of Israel. Our first clue can be found in Hosea chapter 1, verse 10 to 11. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, you are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, you are the sons of the living Creator Yah. Then shall the children of Judah and the children of Israel be gathered together, and appoint or make set, ordain, or establish themselves one head, and they shall come up out of the land. This is how you're going to know that time is here. For great shall be the day of Jezreel. At some time in the future, Judah, example the Jews, and the children of Israel, Ephraim, will be gathered together and appoint for themselves one head, and they shall be regathered from the earth where they have been scattered in the great day of Jezreel, another name for the great and terrible day of Yah's wrath. This event has not happened yet any time in Israel's long history. This one passage gives us some powerful clues as to the timing of Ephraim's return. It is after the proverbial battle of Armageddon, which occurs in the Jezreel Valley, where the armies of the east and the kings of the earth gather together to battle against the Almighty Creator on that great day. During the period known as the wrath of Yah, this event occurs at the return of David, when at his return he will destroy Babylon the Great, the New World Order Antichrist system, at which time both houses of Israel, Jews, will begin to accept him as their Messiah or head again. This event has not happened yet. A corollary passage to Hosea chapter 1 verse 10 to 11 is the famous two sticks prophecy of Ezekiel chapter 37 verses 15 through 27. Here, Yah tells the prophet to take two sticks or trees for the two houses of Israel and bring them together in his hand so that they become one stick with one king over them, a resurrected David. Don't let nobody tell you JC got nothing to do with this. This is plain as day. A resurrected David. That's going to be your king. That's who's going to rule and united in the covenant between them and Yah. At that time, Yah will make his sanctuary or tabernacle among them, and together this united Israelite kingdom will worship the Creator. Clearly, Hosea's and Ezekiel's prophecy speak of the same event, which has yet to happen. Both prophecies are speaking of events surrounding the coming of the Messiah David, the resurrection of the dead, and the establishment of Messiah's millennial kingdom on earth. The second clue, the repeating paradigm of Israel's redemption. Biblically, the concept of the return of exile and scattered Israel, including Ephraim, to the land of Israel is tied to the idea of redemption. Biblically, the concept of redemption involves a stronger person, the Redeemer, intervening on behalf of a weaker person, the enslaved, us, Israel, the one needing redemption, that would be us, defeating the captor of the slave, thus allowing the enslaved to go free. David is going to do that, not JC. The first biblical example of this process occurred when Yah redeemed Israel out of Egypt. The biblical prophets compare this first exodus to a greater or second exodus that is yet to occur in the future. In Jewish thought, the exodus out of Egypt is called the first redemption. Yet the biblical prophets also speak of Israel going into captivity again, this time to Egypt, again by ships. Again by ships, into the exile of the nations. From this place of exile and spiritual enslavement, Yah promises to redeem Israel from slavery again, but this time in the last days. The Jewish sages refer to this momentous event as the final redemption. Now, y'all pay attention. This time by ships. We didn't just go to one nation or one country. We went to many other places in this world by ships. And I don't want to go through the list of them. I think y'all pretty much know where they are. But ships were used to transport us all over the four corners of the earth. In the prophecies of the Bible and in Jewish thought, the concept of the final redemption is synonymous with the idea of a second or greater exodus of Israel from its exile in the nations of the world. Now, according to the Jewish sages and based on their understanding of the biblical prophecies, this redemption of the tribes of Israel, including the 10 northern tribes, will occur at the end of 6,000 years. Now, I highlighted this for a reason because a lot of times when you find this information doing your research for information, they don't always get it right. But me and my wife, we calculated and we believe we got pretty close. It is more closer to 6,984 rather than 6,000. So basically, if you look at this timeline, these 7 days that were created in creation are a mirror or image of the years in which we have to get our stuff together. So the 6,000 years that you see here could very easily be referred to 6 days. So we are just around the corner from our Sabbath day, which would be 7,000 years. Like I said, 6,984. Now, give or take a little. I'm not saying that I'm exact, but I use the timeline between each progenitor or patriarch from the time of Adam all the way up until the days of Noah and Moses, and further on into this present age. And we got 6,984. And that's nothing to snout at, man. I mean, you're almost in the seventh day. You are right at the very end. All right. So, which they refer to as the age of Messiah. Obviously, we're closer to being right with 6,984 than this number you see here on the screen, because David haven't showed up yet. And we are past the 6,000th year. This is to occur just prior to a time period they refer to as the Messianic age. Again, the concept of the final redemption has its origin in the promises of Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 1 through 10, where we read in summary, Yah, your creator, will gather you from all the nations, whither Yah, your creator, has scattered you. If any of you be driven out unto the outmost parts of heaven, from there will the Creator, your Father, gather you, and from there will he fetch you, and your Creator will bring you into the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. The Jewish sages teach, again, based on their understanding of the Hebrew scriptures, that the following notable events will occur in the conjunction with the final redemption. There will be an ingathering of the dispersed remnant of Israelite exiles to the land of Israel, including both the exiles of the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom and those of the southern kingdom of Israel, comprised of the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and part of Levi, collectively known as the Jews, from the lands where they have been scattered. Messiah, David, will assume rulership over the earth, and the messianic age will be established upon this earth for 1,000 years. The Torah will be imposed as the law of the earth. How can we not see? There is no New Testament. Everything is about the Torah. That's going to come back in its completed reinstatement. So there won't be any New Testament as the Christians would have us believe. So let's read that again. The Torah will be imposed as the law of the earth. Now, it's easy to see the New Testament is not a part of the Torah. So what are we talking about here? What Torah? All the books, including the ones that were removed. What book do we supposed to be looking at, reading, studying? The Torah. That's it, nothing else. King David will rule over a reunited Israel. The tabernacle of David. The resurrection of the dead will occur at the coming of the Messiah. The biblical prophets and Jewish sages view Israel's redemption from Egypt as a precursor, a type of prophetic model of Israel's final redemption in the end times, and as one of the events accompanying coming of the Messiah, David. As an aspect of the final redemption, an obvious question must be asked. How long will the regathering of scattered Israel back to their land take? Is the day of Yah's wrath a literal day, or is it a time period? Since the Hebrew word for day, yom, can mean both. The prophet Isaiah may give us a clue. In several places, he mentions the day of Yah's vengeance, or words to this effect. This is the time period when the Creator will judge the nations, including Babylon the Great, which occurs at David's coming in three places. Isaiah indicates that the day of Yah will last for 1 year. Isaiah chapter 34, verse 8, Isaiah chapter 61, verse 2, and Isaiah chapter 63, verse 4. Interestingly, in Isaiah 63 and 4, the prophet couples the idea of the day of Yah's vengeance being a year long with the Jubilee year. I want y'all to keep this Jubilee year in mind because I'm going to expose something about this Jubilee year. The year of my redeemed has come. This occurs as the Messiah, the subject of Isaiah chapter 63, verses 1 through 6, judges the enemies of Israel, notably Edom, as he is at the same time about to redeem, regather, and return scattered Israel to its promised land inheritance. It appears that while David is judging Israel's enemies at his coming, he will at the same time be regathering the lost and scattered 12 tribes of Israel, a process that will take no longer than 1 year. Following the example of the first redemption, where Israel was delivered by the strong arm of Yah, the Redeemer, the biblical prophets and Jewish sages do not explain exactly how Israel will be redeemed the second time, but simply say that she will be redeemed by the strong arm of Yah when he defeats her enemies, sets her free, and allows her to make her way to the promised land, as occurred in the first redemption of ancient Israel. Her being set was not set free. As Israel was not set free from Egypt through her own efforts, except by having faith in Yah and leaving Egypt when he opened the door, there is every indication in the biblical prophecies that the same will occur in the final redemption. As I will discuss below, the people of Israel will first need to recognize that they are Israel. Now, I got to say this. I have met so many people that I have attempted to reveal to them who they are. And I had a reply from most all of them that said, I'm not no Israelite. They denied their ethnicity, that they have turned from Yah and his Torah. They didn't turn from the New Testament because it didn't exist. It's not required. They have turned from Yah and his only book, the Torah, not New Testament, and that they need to repent of their sin and return to Yah and the Torah. While the Jewish sages view the final redemption as a precursory event to the coming of the Messiah at the end of the age, the Torah writers teach us that this process of the redemption of mankind actually began with the first prophecy of the coming of David and will continue until his arrival. Did y'all listen? Let me read that again. The Torah writers teach us that this process of the redemption of mankind actually began with the first prophecy of the coming of David and will continue until his arrival, a process that has been anticipated for 2,000 years or better. This process can be summarized as follows. The final redemption of Ephraim began 2,000 years ago when 10 men of nations took hold of the fringes of a Jew. Zechariah chapter 8, verse 23. As we have already noted, Ephraim is a biblical colloquialism for the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel, whose biological and grafted in descendants, that is, those of Israel who went astray and practiced the Gentile ways, They will be grafted back in. They're not new. They're not somebody from the original Gentiles. They are once was Israel, but they abandoned the faith. The grafted ones, that's what we're talking about here, are the Israelites who went astray and were considered Gentiles. The 10 men of the nations is a prophetic reference to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The 10 tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel, who Yah sent into captivity and who became scattered among the Gentile nations. This redemption process, which involves the restoration of all things and the turning of our hearts, or the returning of the hearts of the children back to the fathers of their faith, the Torah. Malachi chapter 4, verse 1 to 6, just before the day of Yah's wrath, started in the 20th century and is picking up pace as more and more Gentile Israelites are returning to the Hebraic roots of their faith, the Torah. The idea of the final redemption is tied to the biblical concept of Israel's first exodus from Egypt and her future second exodus from the nations of the world. Let's now examine the prophecies that pertain to this second exodus. The third clue, understanding the second exodus. The concept of the messianic age in Hebraic thought involves an understanding of the first and final redemptions, which are two separate events. The first redemption or first exodus occurred when the Israelites obeyed the word of the Creator and placed the blood of the Lamb on the doorposts of their homes, resulting in Yah delivering them out of Egypt. It is understood by redeemed believers that Israel's exodus from Egypt was prototypical of the ones placing their faith in Yah, who redeems them from sin. By contrast, the final redemption or second exodus is a series of events that will occur at the end of the age prior to the return of David, the Messiah, at the beginning of the Messianic age or millennium. For those who have placed saving faith in Yah at the final redemption, the redeemed believers will receive their spiritual or glorified bodies at the resurrection of the dead, which occurs at the coming of David. After that, they will rule and reign with David. Now let's explore some of the biblical prophecies that pertain to the second Exodus. This will yield us more clues as to the timing of the return of Ephraim to the land of Israel. Isaiah chapter 11, verses 10 through 12. And chapter Isaiah chapter 11 and verse 10 and Isaiah chapter 12 verse 6. Although consisting of two chapters, this passage of scripture is part of the same prophecy and speaks about the coming of Messiah and the regathering of the outcast of Israel from the nations to which they have been scattered. Below is a list of the salient points that pertain to the second Exodus along with my commentary. The root of Jesse, the Messiah, will be an ensign or banner to the Gentiles of the nations. We know that David was the root of Jesse. Here, the prophet seems to be talking about another group of people, a remnant of his people, the outcast of Israel in verse 12, as opposed to the larger group of Gentile believers from among the nations who have heard the message, which referred to in verse 10. Yah will recover his people, the remnant of Israel, the second time, the second Exodus, from all lands, including the islands of the sea, North and South America, England, Australia, Japan, and etc. Yah will set up an ensign or banner for the nations and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel and the dispersed of Judah. The remnant or outcasts of Israel who are scattered among the nations. Only the outcasts of Israel will be regathered along with the dispersed of Judah. It is among this remnant group of scattered redeemed Israelites and dispersed redeemed Jews that peace between the two groups will occur. Let me read that again. I stumbled. It is among this remnant group of scattered redeemed Israelites and dispersed redeemed Jews that peace between the two groups will occur. How may we ask, are these two previously antagonistic groups brought together? This can only occur through a common adherence to the Torah. At the same time, in other words, y'all, you have to be in agreement. You can't be in the New Testament and the Torah. You won't be in agreement. So I'm going to read it. This can only occur through a common adherence to Torah only. At the same time, the adversaries of Judah and Ephraim, the Edomites, are Muslims, and their Islamofascist terrorist allies, more on this later, will be cut off. Therefore, Judah and Ephraim will defeat Edom, the Philistines of the West Bank, and Moab. Note that all these enemies of Israel are Muslim nations. Compare this with the prophecies of Obadiah, chapter 18, and Zechariah, chapter 9, verse 13. Perhaps there are two groups of Judites and Ephraimites, the remnant of the greater group. It appears that greater or national secular Judah and national secular Ephraim will defeat Edom. The scene switches back to the remnant again, where a highway will be formed for the Creator's people to return to Israel from Assyria, the nation of their captivity. This second Exodus will be similar to Israel's leaving Egypt the first time. As the Creator led ancient Israel through the wilderness en route to a promised land, he will do the same in the last days when Israel returned to the land of Israel from the nations of her exile. This chapter seems to describe a millennial setting. For example, verse 3 is understood in Hebraic thought to be a reference to Hoshana Rabbah, the last great day of the fall biblical feast of tabernacle, or Sukkot, which is a prophetic picture of the millennium when the Spirit of the Creator will be poured out upon the earth. Now let's note Isaiah chapter 11 and verse 10 and Isaiah chapter 12 and verse 6 in the broader context of the chapters following this passage. Perhaps there is some additional understanding to be found as to the timing of Ephraim's return by examining the event foretold therein. Chapter 13, verse 6, chapter 13, verse 6 and verse 9 and verse 13 speak of the day of the Creator's wrath, which occurs at the end of the age when the Creator will judge the nations as described. The wrath in Isaiah chapter 13 is directed at Babylon. And in the last days, Yah's wrath is toward the nations of the world. Did y'all understand that? The wrath in Isaiah chapter 13 is or was directed at Babylon. And in the last days, his wrath is toward the nations of the entire world, as represented by Babylon the Great, which is a greater world ruling version of the original Babylon, because of the proximity of Isaiah chapter 11, describing the second Exodus, with chapter 13. Prophesying the fall of Babylon, it would appear that these two events are related. After this, chapter 14 goes on to talk about the fall of the king of Babylon with verses 13 through 20, and then curiously links this to Lucifer's rebellion against Yah and his fall from glory and his being cast into a pit, verse 15, and Yah's end times judgment of Babylon the Great with Lucifer the devil as its head. This could be the case. In chapter 14, Isaiah then goes on to prophesy another judgment against the king of Babylon, then a judgment against the Assyrians and the Philistines. Isaiah chapter 14, Moab, Isaiah chapter 16, and Syria, Isaiah chapter 17, and America, a land beyond and due west of Ethiopia that is accessible only by ocean ships. Isaiah chapter 18. And finally, judgment upon Egypt, Isaiah chapter 19 and verse 20. Then chapter 21 readdresses the fall of Babylon, where in verse 9 the phrase Babylon is repeated as if to say that Babylon fell once, but that it will fall again in the end times. That's what this means. Babylon is fallen twice. Babylon fell once in the past, and it's beginning to fall now in the future. Isaiah then goes on to pronounce judgment against Edom and Arabia, Isaiah chapter 21, against Phoenicia, Isaiah chapter 23, and against the whole earth, Isaiah chapter 24. The fall of Babylon the Great occurs after the judgments of the wrath of Yah are poured out upon the whole earth. After this, David returns to the earth with his heavenly army to bring final judgment upon the armies that have gathered at Armageddon. At this time, Lucifer and his anti-Messiah confederacy, who dare to exalt themselves against Yah and his anointed one, will be dashed to pieces and destroyed for good. So, we see from this series of passages additional clues as to the timing of the second Exodus and the return of Ephraim to the land of Israel, as the first Exodus of Israel from Egypt occurred in conjunction with Egypt's judgment and demise. So it appears that similar events will surround the second Exodus. Yah will judge all the nations which are part of end times Babylon the Great and the devil, who is the instigator of man's rebellion against the Creator Yah. And then the dispersed captives of Israel will be set free to return to her promised inheritance. Perhaps this whirlwind tour of all these prophecies is a little bit overwhelming, and my analysis may seem to be too broad and speculative. But before jumping to any conclusions, one way or the other, let's continue to examine other biblical prophecies on this subject to determine if a pattern of events will begin to take shape that will shed light on the timing of Ephraim's return. After you begin to see how these pieces of the puzzle fit together to form the whole picture, you will be in a better position to determine if there is enough evidence from the whole counsel of the scriptures to support what I am proposing. Another solid Exodus reference is found in Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 14 to 15. Here we read, "Therefore, behold, the days come, says Yah, that it shall no more be said, Yah lives, that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. But Yah lives, that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north and from the lands whither he had driven them. And I will bring them again into their land that I gave unto their fathers." What stands out about this passage is that the second Exodus will be much greater in scope than the first Exodus and will involve scattered Israelites. Remember, in Egypt, they weren't scattered. They were all together in Egypt. It will be much greater in scope than the first Exodus and will involve scattered Israelites being regathered from the countries north of Israel and from wherever else they have been scattered. It must be remembered that the lands of Babylon and Assyria, into which ancient Israel was exiled, was primarily east northeast of Israel and not due north of Israel, as this prophecy indicates. So this prophecy has yet to future fulfillment. It hasn't been filled yet. What's more, in the future, when these prophecies are fulfilled, Yah promises to punish Israel for its iniquity or lack of keeping his Torah. Verse 17 and 18. This will happen when the Israelites who have been scattered among the Gentiles begin to wake up and realize that much of what they have been taught as religious truth is nothing more than worthless anti-Torah lies. Verse 19. At the same time, they will come to know the name of Yah. Verse 21. A possible reference to the restoration of the Hebrew biblical names of deity, which is happening in our day among who are rediscovering the Hebrew roots of their faith in the Creator. Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 7 to 8. This second Exodus prophecy is almost a direct quote from Jeremiah's earlier chapter 16, verse 14 to 15 prophecy, which I have just mentioned above. It is interesting to note the timing of this prophecy's fulfillment. This second Exodus, regathering, corresponds with King David's reigning over this earth and executing judgment, verses 2 to 5, something that will not happen until King David's coming, when he will defeat his enemies and establish his millennial kingdom on earth. So, we see from this passage that the second Exodus, when scattered Israel, including Ephraim, is regathered and returns to dwell safely in the land of Israel. Verse 6 coincides with the coming of David and the beginning of the millennium. So, the first Exodus compared to the second Exodus. So let's now examine the first Exodus and compare it to the second Exodus that many end-time believers and Jewish sages believe will happen at the end of the age, prior to the coming of the Messiah and arrival of the Messianic age or millennium. Maybe this will give us some more clues as to the timing of Ephraim's return to Israel. First, what are the similarities between the first and second Exodus? The children of Israel could not leave Egypt as long as they were bound as slaves to that land. When Yah brought judgment against Egypt and crushed the nation, Egypt no longer had the power to keep Israel, who in, Egypt no longer had the power to keep Israel enslaved, who was free to leave at this point. This was Israel's first redemption or first Exodus. If the second Exodus will follow the pattern of the first Exodus, then in the end times, the worldwide system known as Babylon the Great, which enslaved men, including scattered Israelites, especially economically, politically, and religiously, will have to be judged first and destroyed before her captives are set free. Do you understand what I'm saying? The worldwide system known as Babylon the Great, which enslaved men, including scattered Israelites, especially economically, politically, and religiously, will have to be judged first and then destroyed before her captives are set free. That's when we will set free, y'all. Only after Babylon has fallen, when King David destroys it at his coming, Israel will be free to return to the land of Israel in masses. This is when the Jubilee trumpet of freedom will sound to proclaim liberty throughout the earth. In ancient Israel, the Jubilee trumpet sounded every 50 years on the biblical holy day of Yom Kippur. Because of this and other reasons, we believe that King David will return to this earth on Yom Kippur, the Jubilee year. And I just feel it in my soul that that's correct. I believe that King David will return to this earth on a Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is one of the special months in the Torah. It is the 7th month of the year. Exodus chapter 13, verse 20. The first place the Israelites came to after leaving Egypt was Sukkot. In this, a prophetic indicator that Israel will largely return to the land of Israel on or during the fall biblical festival event known as the Feast of Tabernacles or Sukkot. The Israelites weren't able to leave Egypt until that nation was judged and destroyed. Similarly, it was seen that only after David judges and destroys Babylon the Great during the 7 bowl judgments and at the Battle of Armageddon that Ephraim will be able to leave their captive nations for the land of Israel. Next, the children of Israel had to wander in the wilderness for a while, where Yah refined out of them the spiritual corruption of Egypt. Y'all remember the old saying, you are a product of your environment? Israel had been in Egypt so long, they have developed the same ways of the Egyptians, and that had to be refined, cleaned up, gotten rid of. So, next, the children of Israel had to wander in the wilderness for a while, where Yah refined out of them the spiritual corruption of Egypt. It's going to have to happen again. It was the same, it was in the wilderness that he gave them his Torah. What did he give them? His Torah. New Testament? No, his Torah. That's where he gave them his Torah and formed them into a godly nation that was ready to enter the promised land. Similarly, biblical prophecies speak of the end times saints going through a wilderness in the route to the promised land. There they will be spiritually refined just like before. Those who refuse to follow Yah's Torah will be excluded, while those who do will be permitted to return to the land of Israel. Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 34 through 38. Notice there is no mention of a New Testament. Additionally, other prophecies speak of a highway being made through the wilderness for scattered Israel to return to the promised land. For certain, the saints of end-time Israel will come into her promised inheritance by way of the wilderness. Isaiah chapter 11, verse 16, Isaiah chapter 40, verse 3 to 4, Isaiah chapter 35, verse 8, and Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, as did the children of Israel in the first Exodus. Joshua led the Israelites into the promised land. In the second Exodus, at David's coming, David will lead the saints or redeemed Israel into the promised land in the end days. This will commence a 1,000-year-long millennial Sabbath rest for the Israelite saints of Yah. Judah was the tribe to lead the way into the promised land in the first Exodus. Numbers chapter 10, verse 13 to 14. The Jews of the tribe of Judah have been the first to return to the land of Israel in our time. If the prophecies of the Bible are true, and I believe they are, then the rest of the tribes will follow after Judah. Now, when I say this, I'm not talking about they are in this land that's being claimed by the fake Jews. They are coming back to the land of where our forefathers were created, not the actual land of Jerusalem. The tribe of Judah, that's those that are coming right now. And a lot of them don't even know that that's who they are or even why they're coming. Then the rest of the tribes will follow after Judah. If they don't, then the Bible lies when it speaks of all the tribes returning to the land of Israel in the last days. Yah promised to go before Israel as a consuming fire to destroy her enemies who were illegally inhabiting the land Yah had promised to Israel, and who were hindering Israel's entrance into the land. Deuteronomy chapter 9 and verse 3. In the end times, at the second Exodus, King David will destroy with consuming fire all of redeemed Israel's enemies who will be hindering her return to their promised land inheritance. Israel had to drive out the inhabitants of Canaan, at least those who were antagonistic against Israel. The Gibeonites were an exception. Under Joshua, the warriors' leaderships, this feat Israel was able to do only with Yah's miraculous help. Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 3, Deuteronomy chapter 11 and verse 23. End times Israel, Yah's warrior bride, under the leadership of King David, the warrior king would drive out and defeat her enemies, Edom and Babylon the Great, who would be preventing her from entering the promised land. As ancient Israel had to come into Torah obedience, y'all really hear me when I'm talking about the Torah. Listen to this. Look how many times it's been emphasized. As ancient Israel had to come into Torah obedience in preparation for entering the promised land. Deuteronomy 11 and 8. In other words, if you are not completely Torah obedient and Torah only, you're not going to get into that kingdom. You're not going in. So if you're a Christian, just get used to being locked out, and much worse, you're not going in there. So in the last days, a return to Torah will be a precursor requirement for redeemed Israel to enter her promised inheritance in the land. Many biblical prophecies attest to this fact. The rebels and Toralists, now y'all kind of made this word up. I guess it's a word. The rebels and the Toralists will not enter the land of Israel. Ezekiel chapter 20, verses 37 to 38. Finally, what are the dissimilarities between the first and second Exodus? The children of Israel went out of Egypt as a unified group in the first Exodus, since they all lived in the land of Goshen in Egypt. However, in the second Exodus of the last days, scattered Israel by virtue of the fact that they have been scattered around the world will not return to Israel as a single unified group. Did y'all get that? The first Exodus, the whole nation of Israel was in Goshen. They were all there together, so they weren't scattered. This time, they're going to have to be gathered from all over the world because they have been scattered around the world. They will not return to Israel as a single unified group. They will likely return in waves at various times from various places. Many of Judah have already returned or began to return to the land which was once called Israel, all of Africa. Some of them don't realize it. The first wave of Ephraimites will likely include those resurrected saints who will enter into the promised land at David's coming, thereafter, and on into the millennium, little by little. More lost and found Israelites, those of both Judah and Ephraim, will begin to make their way back to the land of Israel from the spiritual wilderness to where they have been scattered for so long. Now, I just want to make a comment right here. Those of us that have come to the so-called motherland, are not here claiming to have walked across into the land of Israel. We are in the motherland so that when the time comes, we will gather here and be led into into Israel by King David. That's what I'm saying. This will occur little by little as they realize that they are Israelites biologically and repent of their sins and return to the Creator of Israel and get this and accept the Messiah and the Torah. Now, one of the biggest problems I have noticed doing a lot of these lessons, when the Christians run across my lessons, is their rejection of me talking Torah only, because they're Christians and they are trying to promote Christianity, which is a Roman God. These are the ones that's going to fight tooth and nail, because they are waiting for JC to return, but they're going to see this big black face of David. It's going to be quite a shock. Not what they expect. But they are going to have to accept the Messiah and the Torah, not the New Testament. You will not be getting in that gate. Why will they not accept the Messiah, David? Because the Christians are waiting for Jesus. They will be under a strong delusion, thinking that David is a false Messiah. So they're going to rise up against David because he's not what they expect. So yes, many will reject David as the true Messiah. Remember, the first Exodus involved the ancient Israelites coming out of Egypt. The Bible prophesies that the second Exodus will involve the last days descendants of those ancient Israelites who have been scattered to the four corners of the globe, returning to the land of Israel. As I noted above, the biblical prophets predicted this would occur. And this has been the consensus of many Jewish sages, including the Talmud, for nearly 2,000 years. If my analysis between the first and second Exodus is correct, it would seem that Ephraim will return to the land of Israel at or just after the coming of David, and after he has destroyed Babylon the Great, and not before. The fourth clue, Ezekiel's wilderness of the people's prophecy. Another clue as to the timing of Ephraim's return to the land of Israel is found in Ezekiel chapter 20 and verse 33 to 34. At this time, I recommend that you read this entire passage in your Bible. Below, I will present a verse-by-verse commentary on what you have just read. Verses 33 to 34. As Yah supernaturally and with his outstretched arm of judgment brought the Israelites out from Egypt, so in the end times Yah will bring the house of Israel out of captive nations where they have been scattered, verses 35 and 36. Yah will bring the house of Israel into a wilderness of the people. Is this a literal wilderness similar to what the children of Israel went through, or a spiritual wilderness where a remnant of faithful Israelites will exist, isolated and rejected in the midst of the heathen peoples of the nations? I don't know. Certainly, many modern day redeemed Israelites are sensing that they are currently in a spiritual wilderness where they feel alienated from the pagans around them, and at the same time, have been rejected by their Jewish brothers. Perhaps Yah has a physical wilderness experience in store for his people as well. I don't know. Until we know for sure, we must watch and pray. In this wilderness of the peoples, Yah will plead with Israel face to face, like he did in the wilderness of Mount Sinai. Here is yet another reference to a future second Exodus. Verses 37 and 38. In that wilderness, Yah will separate or purge out from his people the rebels from the righteous, and the Torahless from the Torah obedient. Here it is again, y'all. from the Torahlists, the people who don't believe in the Torah or don't keep it and believe in the New Testament, from the Torah obedient as he did with ancient Israel for 40 years. Thus, those who refused to obey him died in the wilderness. Only those who were obedient to him were permitted to enter the promised land. Verses 38 and 39. During this time of testing and purging, the house of Israel will not be returning to the land of Israel until they have put away their spiritual idols or false doctrines and unbiblical belief system and vain traditions. New Testament. Verses 40 and 41. After this process of spiritual purification and refinement occurs, all the house of Israel, both Judah and Ephraim, will be acceptable to Yah and will serve only him on his holy mountain in Jerusalem. This prophecy obviously has not yet been fulfilled. Verses 42 to 44. All the house of Israel, example, Judah and Ephraim, will not return to the land of Israel until they loathe their spiritual pollutedness or state of Torahlessness. This prophecy has not yet been fulfilled either. Anyone keeping anything other than the Torah will be excluded. No New Testament. Another corollary passage of Ezekiel's wilderness of the people's prophecy is Hosea chapter 2, verse 14 to 23. Here, Yah speaks of an alluring Ephraim into a wilderness where he will speak kindly to her. After that, Yah will give her vineyards and the valley of Acre, meaning trouble, for a door of hope. It's been mistranslated that there will be a time of Jacob's troubles. This is a false doctrine. Let's read what Jeremiah really said prophetically about the Jacob's troubles. Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 1 to 8. Verse 1. The word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, Thus speaks the Lord God of Israel, saying, Write all the words which I have spoken to thee in a book. For behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will bring back the captivity of my people Israel and Judah, says the Lord, and I will bring them back to the land which I gave to their fathers, and they shall be lords of it. We're talking about Israel. I need y'all to pay close attention. I'm going to show you this is not Jacob's trouble, it's Esau's trouble. And these are the words which the Lord spoke concerning Israel and Judah. Thus says the Lord, ye, Israel, he's talking to Israel, ye shall hear a sound of fear. Where is that fear coming from? It's coming from those nations that surround them. They are in fear. There is fear, and there is not peace. These are the other nations. This is not a prophetic revelation of Jacob's trouble, as we will see here in just a second. Inquire and see if a male has borne a child, and ask concerning the fear wherein they, ye appear, and they, ye, this is Israel, they, this is the nations, shall hold their loins. The nations are in fear, and they shall look for safety. For I have seen every man and his hands are on his loins. Now get this. Their faces are turned to paleness. When have you ever known Jacob's dark face to turn pale? So he cannot be referring to Jacob as having these troubles. It has to be the nations. They are the only ones that can turn paleness. For that day is great, and there is not such another. And it is a time of straightness to Jacob, but he shall be saved out of it. So in that day, saith the Lord, I will break the yoke off their neck, Israel, and will burst their bonds, and they shall no longer serve strangers, but they shall serve the Lord their God, and I will raise up to them David their king. I just showed y'all up above here where David was the promised prophesied Messiah. According to Jeremiah, this will not be Jacob's trouble, but Esau's troubles, and they are in those troubles right now. Jacob will witness Esau's trouble, which I will discuss below, before entering the promised land. What is the significance of Acre? You will recall that it was there that Achan and his family were stoned to death because they brought sin into the camp of Israel. Joshua chapter 7, verse 1 through 26. Israel was not able to go forward in its conquest of the promised land until the sin was put out of their camp. In Ezekiel's wilderness of the people, Yah will deal with sin in the camp by passing his people under the rod of his judgment as a shepherd separates out of his sheep. And there he will purge out of the rebels from Israel to those who are the transgressors or who walked not in the Torah. Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 37 to 38. Even as Yah purged Israel out of the sin of Achan before they were allowed to enter the promised land. In his prophecy, Hosea likens this second Exodus to the first Exodus when Israel came out of Egypt with joy. The second Exodus will be a time when Israel will become endeared to Yah as a wife to her husband, and he will take the name of foreign gods from out of their mouth. Who are these foreign gods? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Each of these are Roman and Greek gods. He will then make a covenant with Israel and betroth herself to Israel forever, and betroth himself to Israel forever. This is an event that the Bible clearly associates with the coming of David. The fifth clue, understanding Jacob's trouble. What is Jacob's trouble? The phrase Jacob's trouble is found in Jeremiah chapter 30 and verse 7, which we just read. There has been much speculation among Christian commentators as to the meaning of this phrase. Prophetically, classical commentators see Jacob's trouble as relating to the Babylonian exile of the Jews and their redemption from captivity. The error with this interpretation is that Jeremiah speaks of not only the Jews, the house of Judah, the southern kingdom, but also of the people of Israel, or the house of Israel, the northern kingdom. See verse 3 and 4. Furthermore, this prophecy speaks of a resurrected David ruling over a redeemed Judah and Israel. Clearly, this hasn't happened yet. On the other hand, many modern Christian commentators see Jacob's trouble as a future end times event relating to Jewish people, Daniel's 70th week, the Great Tribulation, the man of sin, and the Antichrist. The problem with this interpretation is that although it takes the Jews, the house of Judah, into account, it too fails to take into account the house of Israel and a resurrected David ruling over both houses of Israel. For context, I will cite verses 2 through 9. This is an end time prophecy pertaining to both Ephraim and Judah. Thus speaks Yah of Israel, saying, Write you all the words that I have spoken unto you in a book. For lo, the days come, says Yah, that I will bring again the captivity of my people Israel and Judah, says Yah, And I will cause them to return to the land that I gave to their fathers, and they shall possess it. And these are the words that Yah spoke concerning Israel and concerning Judah. For thus says Yah, we have heard a voice of trembling, of fear, and of not of peace. Ask you now, and see whether a man travails with child. Wherefore do I see every man with his hands on his loins, as a woman in travail, and all faces are turned into paleness. Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. For it shall come to pass in that day that the Creator of hosts say that I will break his yoke off your neck and will burst your bonds, and strangers shall no longer serve themselves of him, but they shall serve the Creator, their Father, and David their King, whom I will raise up unto them. When it was said that Jeremiah spoke of Jacob's trouble, I believe this was a mistranslation. My reason is Jeremiah chapter 30, verses 1 through 8, and the Septuagint translation reads as follows. The word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, Thus speaks the Lord God of Israel, saying, Write all the words which I have spoken in a book, to thee in a book. For behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will bring back the captivity of my people Israel and Judah, saith the Lord. And I will bring them back to the land which I gave to their fathers, and they shall be lords of it. And these are the words which the Lord spoke concerning Israel and Judah. Thus saith the Lord, shall Israel shall hear. Now here's this word ye again. This is speaking to Israel. Ye, Israel, shall hear a sound of fear. There is fear, and there is not peace. Inquire and see if a male has borne a child, and ask concerning the fear wherein they shall hold their loins, they being the other nations, not Israel, and look for safety. For I have seen every man, and his hands are on his loins. Their faces are turned to paleness. What Israelite face can turn pale? For that day is great, and there is not such another. And it is a time of straightness to Jacob, but he shall be saved out of it. In that day, saith the Lord, I will break the yoke off their neck and burst the bonds, and they shall no longer serve strangers, but they shall serve the Lord their God, and I will raise up to them David their king. The 12 tribes of Israel, in other words, perhaps an understanding of Israel's history will yield some clues as to her future. The cyclical nature of biblical history, that is, biblical history repeating itself, is the paradigmatic view through which the Jewish sages view many Old Testament events. For example, I have already discussed the cycles of redemption that have occurred in Israel's history and that will occur in her future, because Israel is under the hand of divine guidance. The prophets and the Jewish sages realized that this unseen heavenly hand deals in similar fashions with different generations of Israelites. This appears to be the case when it comes to understanding the meaning behind Jacob's trouble, which is actually Esau's trouble. With this in mind, what event in Jacob's life was his darkest day and would merit the rubric of Jacob's trouble? Doubtless, it would have been when he was returning to his home in Canaan after 20 years exile in Babylon under the servitude of Laban. After laboring hard and starting with nothing, he had gained 2 wives, many children, and much wealth. Now Esau, his hate-filled brother, was seeking his life, and he was about to lose everything. And while I'm not aware that the Jewish sages have connected this event in Jacob's life with Jeremiah's usage of the phrase Jacob's trouble, they do have the sense that Jacob's perilous encounter with his brother Esau or Edom foreshadows future experiences Israel would have with Esau's descendants. They see Edom as an allusion to the nations in whose lands the people of Israel are currently exiled, and from which, I might add, captive Israel would be set free, enabling them to return to the land of Israel, even as Jacob did when leaving Laban. Now let's analyze Jeremiah 30 verse by verse to find more clues in helping us to ascertain the timing of Ephraim's return to the land of Israel as it relates to Jacob's trouble. Verse 3. This is a future prophecy concerning Israel and Judah involving their return to the land Yah gave their fathers. This period of time is a time of trembling and fear, of dread and terror, or terrorism. We see that today, and not of peace. Now, because we see this terrorism, we're in the midst of it. So, yeah, it's going to disturb us, but it's not our troubles. It's their troubles. We just need to be quiet, stay out of the way, don't get involved. So this period of time is a time of trembling and fear and of dread and terrorism, and not of peace. It is likened to a woman's birth pains. It is a time of Jacob's trouble. The Hebrew word for trouble means straits, distress, tribulation, affliction, and adversity. Yah promised to save Jacob out of it. Yah of hosts promises to break the yoke off from Israel's neck. Yah will raise up or resurrect David, and he will be king over a united kingdom. This sets the time period to that of Ezekiel chapter 37, Valley of Dry Bones, and the two stick prophecies pertaining to Ephraim's and Judah's resurrection and reunification at the coming of the Messiah, when David will rule over the united kingdom. Verses 10, 11, and 17. Yah will bring the seed of Jacob, or the outcast, back from afar, from the land of their captivity, and will judge the nations where he had scattered them. Yah will completely destroy the nations in which he scattered Israel, but he will preserve Israel out of them, although Yah will punish Israel as well. This is an aspect of Jacob's trouble. Even as Jacob was wounded in his struggle with the angel or messenger of Yah in Genesis chapter 32, verse 22 to 32, so scattered Israel will be wounded or punished because of the multitude of their iniquities and sins, not keeping the Torah. So let's now look at Jacob's trouble in Genesis 32 to see if it will yield some clues pertaining to the timing and of the events surrounding the return of Ephraim's end days return to the land of Israel. Jacob's trouble, a brief commentary on Genesis 32, is the story of Jacob's return to Canaan after having been exiled from his homeland for 20 years. His exile occurred after he obtained his birthright from Esau through nefarious means, resulting in his having to leave Canaan for fear of his life. Due to Esau's desire for vengeance, Jacob found refuge in the realm of Babylonia at his uncle Laban's home, where he married Laban's two daughters, Leah and Rachel. Genesis 32 recounts Jacob's encounter with Esau, who, along with his small army, physically stood in Jacob's way from entering his promised homeland. This, I believe, is the Jacob's trouble to which Jeremiah is referring to. The events of Genesis 32 seem to be a prophetic prototype of what will happen to Jacob's descendants when they come back to the land of Israel in the end times after being exiled in the nations of spiritual Babylon. Why do I say this? It's because the biblical prophets predict events that will happen to Jacob's descendants that fit the scenario we see in Genesis chapter 32. For example, Jacob's descendants that fit the scenario we see in Genesis 32. For example, Jacob divided his family into two camps. Genesis 32, verse 3 and verse 7. In preparation for meeting Esau, his brother. In the end times, the descendants of Jacob will be divided into two camps, Judah and Ephraim, as they prepare to enter into the promised land. But blocking them will be the descendants of Esau or Edom, many of whose descendants comprise the modern Palestinians, Arab Muslims. Both camps are returning out of spiritual Babylon, where they have been in servitude to the Babylonian world system, even as Jacob was a servant to Laban, who lived in the area of ancient Babylon. They will not defeat Esau through appeasement. Genesis 32, verse 20, as Jacob tried to do with Esau. Appeasement got Jacob nowhere except monetarily poor. And the modern state of Israel, Judah, and the Western Christian nations, led by America, Ephraim, loosely speaking, are dealing with the Palestinians as Jacob did with Esau by giving in to their demands in exchange for a peaceful existence. Appeasement didn't work for Jacob, and it's not presently working for the descendants today. Now, I need y'all to understand something. When you research the history of our people, they always try to connect these people that are pretending to be us into this equation. But you've got to understand, if you know who you are, then you know you are the descendants of Joseph. You know you are the Jews, and you know you're not in that land. This has all been twisted and mangled into making you believe, or attempting to make you believe, that those people over there are the true Jews, and we know they're not. As our father Jacob did, so the end time Israelites will have to wrestle. Now, to get a better understanding of this, these things are going to happen, but not with the people that are claiming to be us in that land right now. But when the time comes for us to get up and get out, they are going to try to block us. They know who we are. They know who they are. So, as our father Jacob did, so the end time Israelites will have to wrestle with man, Edom, and his allies, and the Creator, Genesis 32 and 28, in the wilderness of the peoples, Ezekiel 20, verse 33 to 41. In order to come into the promised land, we will be challenged. We will be blocked. In time, Israel, both Ephraim and Judah, will have to prevail with Yah and demonstrate to him that they are serious about wanting to possess their land, their promised inheritance, and that at the same time overcome themselves, the canal, rebellious, anti-Torah man within, meaning lose that New Testament doctrine. With their pride and self-reliance and the notion that they will return to the land of Israel by their own strength and prowess apart from Yah. Excuse me. Apart from Yah's divine direction and empowerment. Only after Jacob was brought low, after wrestling all night in the dirt with the messenger of Yah, it was when he was humbled and lay wounded in the flesh that he saw the Creator face to face. And he became a new man, spiritually, with a new name and a new identity. Similarly, when Yah's end time, people will repent of their pride and die to their self as a people group, both Judah and Ephraim. This will please the Father, and he will give his people victory over their enemies. Each will have to wrestle with the messenger of Yah. The Jews, Judah, will have to accept David and the living Torah as their Messiah. While the Christians, Ephraim, or Israelites, these are those who have went astray. They're not saying that the Christians that we see today, Ephraim, our people, are clinging to the New Testament, the Christianity of their captives, will have to accept the written Torah. That means you Christians. The word of the Holy Creator, which was the commandment of Yah. Jesus has been a stumbling block to both houses of Israel. And only when they stumble and fall and are broken by the Creator, Isaiah chapter 8, verse 14 to 15, will they be ready to enter the promised land. Now, I'm going to end this here, y'all, because this is a very long lesson. So I'm going to end it here, and I'm going to pick up with a part 2. Part 2 of the second Exodus. What? So I hope that I have made this easy enough to understand. If not, stay tuned and look at this over, and I will be back with the rest of it, and then you can put all the pieces together. Shalom.